Hello, Susan Ortolano here, and it is Thursday. It is July 7th, and I hope everybody had a great weekend. If you're in the United States, I hope you had a great 4th of July. The 3rd of July was my birthday, so I got to do a little celebrating, which was awesome. And I've come to you today with a topic that is all about gender roles in marriage, and I wanted to kind of address this because it's something that has come up a lot when I have worked with couples and marriages, and I think it's something that is sort of a confusing thing these days where, you know, there used to be a particular way, we'll say back in the 50s, 40s, even before that, that marriages operated and things were sort of assigned based on gender and what that gender was supposed to do. In this day and age, it's very, very different. And sometimes I think there's a real confusion about it that leads to a lot of conflict. And we don't want to get into conflict over something like this, but I wanted to kind of read something that I found that I just thought was like, it was one of those things where I was just like, oh my God, and I'm very glad that I was not, you know, around at that particular time. But this was the 1955 Good Housewives Guide explaining how wives should treat their husbands. And it was something that just kind of blew my mind. And this was really, again, 1955. Women in the 50s were expected to do certain things for their husbands. And certainly we know traditions have gone out the window, but this was a Housekeeping Monthly published article from May of 1955, and we will be grateful that we weren't around then. So number one was have dinner ready, and this was sort of the assumption that women were housewives, which there's nothing wrong with, but at that particular time it was rare that women actually worked. So this was like, have dinner ready, plan ahead even the night before to have a delicious meal ready on time for your husband's return. This is a way of letting him know that you've been thinking about him and are concerned about his needs. Number two, most men are hungry when they come home, and the prospect of a good meal, especially his favorite dish, is part of the warm welcome needed. Number three, prepare yourself. Ladies, take 15 minutes to rest so you'll be refreshed when he arrives home. Touch up your makeup, put a ribbon in your hair, and be fresh looking. He's just been with a lot of work-weary people. Be a little, and it says gay, which we know in that era meant happy. Be a little upbeat and a little more interesting for him. His boring day at work may need a lift, and one of your duties is to provide it. Number five, clear away clutter. Make one last trip through the main part of the house just before your husband arrives. Gather up school books, toys, paper from the kids, and then run a dust cloth over the tables. Number six, cover the cooler months of the year, or over the cooler months of the year. You should prepare and light a fire for him to unwind by. Now that's if you have a fireplace. Your husband will feel he has reached a haven of rest and order, and it will give you a lift too. Great, they're finally considering the woman. After all, catering for his comfort will provide you with immense personal satisfaction. Prepare the children. Take a few minutes to wash the children's hands and faces, if they are small. Comb their hair, and if necessary, change their clothes. Children are little treasures, and your husband would like to see them, playing their part. Minimize all noise. At the time of his arrival, eliminate the noise of the washer, the dryer, the vacuum. Try to encourage the children to be quiet. Be happy to see him. Free him with a warm smile and show sincerity in your desire to please him. Listen to him talk about his day. You may have a dozen important things to tell him, ladies, but the moment of his arrival is not the time. Let him talk first. Remember, his topics of conversation are more important than yours. Make the evening his. Never complain if he comes home late or goes out to dinner or places of entertainment without you. Instead, try to understand his world of strain and pressure and his very real need to be at home and relax. Your goal, ladies? Try to make sure your home is a place of peace, order, and tranquility where your husband can renew himself in body and spirit. Don't greet him with complaints or problems. He doesn't want to hear it. Don't complain if he's late coming home for dinner, or even if he stays out all night. Count this as minor in comparison to what he might have gone through that day at work. Make him comfortable. Have him lean back in a comfortable chair, or have him lie down in the bedroom. Have a cool or warm drink ready for him. Arrange his pillow and offer to take off his shoes. Speak in a low, soothing, or pleasant voice. Don't ask him questions about his actions or question his judgment about integrity. Remember, he is the master of the house, and as such will always exercise his will with fairness and truthfulness. You have no right, ladies, to question him. A good wife always knows her place. And that is the 1950s recommendation of how to be a good wife. Now, obviously, this is generally not the case, although there are couples whose marriages are like that because that's what they choose to do. However, gender roles and what is happening in the world is so different than it was in the 1950s. Marriages have changed, but one of the issues that I have seen is that there's still a pull in certain directions when it comes to gender roles. And I certainly have feedback and advice that I encourage couples to do when it comes to who does what and who's supposed to be there for what. And these days, we know a lot of women are working. Not every woman works, and not everybody has kids either. So the whole thing about keep the kids quiet if you have the young kids, first of all, not everybody has young kids. And second of all, we have more women in the workplace than we've ever had. So to have to do all this stuff to make sure the man's needs are catered to leaves the woman out, has her positioned as less than as a wife, and puts all the emphasis on the comfort and needs of a man. And that is not going to work in most situations in this day and age. Now, there are some religions out there where that's sort of the way they want to do marriage, and if they want to do marriage and it works for them, that's great. But for most people, especially for women, even for men, men might kind of see this as a little weird and want a little more, not to be catered to so much, but to have, you know, more of an equal partner. Yes, I mean, it's nice to come home for a dinner, but to, you know, for a woman to go through that, men these days more and more want their wives to be happy, and this is real suppression right here, where it's like a wife isn't really going to be happy with this kind of arrangement. So what is going on with gender roles these days? I know couples that I've worked with where it's gotten mixed up, because as a wife, a lot of wives still want their husbands to kind of bring in some masculine energy. There are still women who prefer that the man, the husband, makes more than she does. Some women want to stay home and, you know, get the next college degree, or you know, take care of their kids. And if that is a choice that two people make together, that's fantastic. Part of the challenge is that sometimes, and I've known wives who do this, and ladies, I don't mean to pick on you, but some wives have started out trying to please or overgive to their husband, have set up very specific things that they do in order to kind of prove their worth or value, and then the husband gets really used to it, and if there are kids, they get really used to it, and then when she's kind of like, hey, is anybody going to help out around the house, They're not doing it because she sort of trained them that she's going to take care of things. So my suggestion always, it all comes down to the type of communication you have in your marriage. If you're able to sit down and talk about things, then you're able to negotiate things that I call a win-win or common ground. I don't believe in compromise. Compromise is sacrifice, and anybody who comes to work with me will learn how to find the common ground, to really do well with communication and conflict resolution on any topic, so that they can find something that works for both of them. In this day and age, we're looking for a married life that works for both people. So there's sometimes a lot of negotiation that needs to happen to find that common ground. And if somebody is wanting to stay out all night or not come home or has certain expectations that is so off from what the other person is even okay with, then there has to be a conversation to make sure that this is a marriage that is still going to work, where the core values are still shared. So it really boils down to, yes, you know, men want a woman who, a lot of men want a woman who's independent, confident, but not too masculine. And men also want a woman who is, you know, feminine and who they can feel masculine around. But women, you know, this day and age, women have stepped up into a variety of different roles. And unfortunately, some women have stepped into a lot of masculine energy, depending on their workspace or how long they were single before they got married. And sometimes don't, you know, we'll say behave in a way where they feel they are so independent that they don't need a man, so that the man's kind of like, how am I supposed to sort of care for her? What can I do for her? I want to do something for her, but she seems to be able to do it all herself. Men do like to be needed. And so, you know, when we come down to looking at gender roles and how things are going to flow in a marriage, again, it comes down to communication. And what works really well with the couples that I've worked with, and what I always recommend, is having this discussion about who's going to do what. So, for example, if there are chores, obviously there are chores to do around the house, and if you don't have the money to hire somebody to be cooking in your kitchen or cleaning up every day, then somebody's going to have to do something. So gender roles typically used to be, as this article would state, that women are supposed to do all of the housework, make all the meals, you know, do all the dishes, all that kind of stuff. And we just don't live in a world where that's always possible. What if her work day is longer than the work day of her husband? What if she's a crappy cook and her husband happens to be a really good one? What if the man is not interested in running certain things, like, you know, managing the money? What if that's just not his thing and he's not interested in it? So this day and age, you know, it's like most people don't like to clean the house, but this day and age, it's more about, you know, collaboration. You know, we both live in a household. We both need to do certain things to contribute to that household. So more and more, it is recommended that people really sit down, even if you've been married for a while and you just haven't gotten this to a place where it's a conflict-free zone. This tends to bring up a lot of conflict for you. To really sit down, look at all the things that need to be done, from money to, if you still have kids in your household that you're raising, what needs to be done for them, what needs to be done, you know, financially, the bills that need to be paid. I mean, these days we have bill pay, we've got all kinds of technology where auto pay, direct deposit, all the things that, you know, we have, a lot of things we have now, they didn't have back in 1955. Again, women are working more and more, and, you know, some people in the last couple of years, everybody had to work at home, and home sort of may have become a place where a lot of issues that were, and I'm going to do a whole Facebook Live on that, issues that had been swept under the rug came out and caused a lot of issues and caused a lot of divorces, to be honest. And I was sitting there when COVID came out and lockdowns happened, or it's like we're going to see a lot of babies and we're going to see a lot of divorces. And in 2019, and I'm going to do a whole lot on this too, the divorce rate statistics for first marriages were actually going down. For second marriages and third marriages, they've been high. They were always, they've just been high, and I'm going to do a whole thing on that and explain why that is and what happens and why those statistics are the way they are. But when people were on lockdown, it's like they suddenly were in close quarters with each other. People were working from home. Somebody may have lost their job. All kinds of things happened. People were homeschooling their kids if they had kids at home, and worried if they had grown kids, what was going on with the grown kids, not able to see people. If people in their family, were dying, it's like they couldn't go into the hospital with the person. And there were a lot of people who lost people during that time, I being one of them. Not because of COVID, just because my mother had cancer. She had cancer for 8 years, and she happened to die last year, as well as my stepfather. And both of them managed to survive COVID. They just didn't survive the diagnoses that they had, sadly. But COVID at the time, had my mother been in a hospital, there were rules about how many people could be in the room at that point. What we had to wear the masks and all that kind of stuff. And with my stepfather, we had to put him in a memory care facility. He had Parkinson's and some dementia, and there were rules about visitation. And they lived in a different state than we did. So it was a time where they both survived it. I don't know how my mother survived it, but she did. And so did my stepfather. I don't know how they both did, but just in the last couple of years, a lot of things have changed, and a lot of couples have had to face things that they did not really look at prior. And some of that had to do with all the things that need to be done, who's going to do what, and that gets into some gender roles. So, my recommendation is look at what needs to be done, who's best at it, who's most interested in doing it. As I said, in my household, my husband does the cooking. Why? I kind of suck at it. He's good at it. He sort of enjoys it, and he doesn't mind doing it, and so he does that. I'm the person online looking at the bank accounts and making plans for things. Like, we sat down and decided who was going to do what based on not a gender role per se, but who was best at this, who was okay doing this, who couldn't stand doing that. And so we've been able to create a system and a situation that works well for us. And couples really need to sit down and have that discussion, because I've seen too many couples where, there's an expectation. Oh, you're the woman, you should be doing this. You're the wife, you should be doing this. You're the husband, you should be doing that. And it's just not working. Yes, as women, we want our husbands to, do certain things for us in a more traditional, masculine, feminine kind of way. Men want that as well. And that doesn't have to take away from being a little more creative in terms of who does what in the household. So I understand that gender roles have gotten really, have changed and can be very confusing depending on what you have set up. It can be a really big source of conflict, of resentment. I've talked to a lot of wives who really resent the fact that they will ask their husband to do something and they're used to her doing it, and then they won't do anything. I've spoken to husbands who often feel emasculated by their wives, who seem to be controlling or take over or don't even allow them to do something. I've talked to husbands who feel like, they really want their wife to do a little bit more, or they just don't want to be doing cleaning, or they'll do the trash, or they'll do something that was considered a man's role. So it has led to a lot of conflict, and it doesn't have to be that way. So if you're in your marriage and that's part of your struggle and conflict in terms of who's doing what, or somebody's not doing this, or somebody had made a request of their spouse and their spouse just didn't do it, or has a different way that they do it that the other spouse doesn't really like or appreciate, then it's necessary to have conversation, and if there's conflict, to really understand how conflict resolution works. So if this is part of what you're going through in your marriage, and or you're somebody who is, you know, divorced and you really want to know how to do marriage better for the next time, if you want to get married again, then this is an opportunity to come have a call with me, and we can talk about all the things that are struggles in your marriage, and to see if I can help. The call is absolutely free, but there is a catch. On the call, and whether I talk to one person or both people, I require that both spouses know that the call is going to happen, and both can have an opportunity to be a part of the call. But if one doesn't want to, my criteria is that they have to know that the call is happening and be on board with resolving whatever the issue is, regardless of whether they come on to the call or not. My other requirement to come on to the call is that people are really committed to making their marriage work. If somebody's already filed for divorce, then then trying to save that marriage may be a lot more difficult. But if somebody's really committed to doing that, I cannot guarantee I can give you the steps to get there if you have an unwilling spouse. But if you have a spouse who is willing to work on things, whether it's wanting to up-level, transform, rekindle because you've grown apart, or whether divorce is actually on the table, then let's see if it's something that I can help you with. So these discovery calls, again, are free, and all you have to do is go to my calendar, and I will leave the link to my calendar, and register. You'll have some questions that need to be answered, so I know something about your situation when we get on the call. Most of the calls, if I'm talking to two people, and that's something that I need to know as well, will there be one or both on the call? If it is one person, then we will do it by phone. If there are two people, we will do it by Zoom audio. And I really ask that if anybody decides to book a call with me, this particular discovery call, that they're very committed to looking at making changes, positive changes in their marriage, and that they're not just sort of looking around to get a free coaching call, because that's not what it is. My goal on the call is to help you know what your next steps are, to really hear what's going on so that I can give you the best path forward possible and give you a little bit of support as well. So that is it for me today, and each week I'm going to be coming in with a different topic, and I will do posts. Generally I do more posts than I did this week, but we had 4th of July on Monday here in the States, and did a little celebrating for that and my birthday. So hashtag replay for those of you who come back and you see this, and I will always leave the link to book a discovery call. I do have a couples program coming up, which I will talk about it at another time. It's coming up really, really soon. For those people who want to up-level their marriage, rekindle things may have gotten flatlined or stale once again, and those who have divorce on the table and they have not figured out how to work it out. This is not therapy. This may seem like some overlap, but this is not therapy, it is coaching. Why I chose coaching over therapy, I think I mentioned before, is because I have a lot of room, a lot of space, because I don't adhere to Board of Behavioral Science like therapists do. So there's a lot I can bring in to help people save, transform, up-level, rekindle their marriages, and be happier than they ever were at the beginning. So that is it for me today. Hopefully you are not in conflict, but if you are, if these are issues for you, or if you have any other issues and conflict in other areas of your marriage, hit me up for that call. Have a beautiful weekend, and I will be back.